For our discussion board this week, we looked at an excerpt that speaks about distance education and the impact that it has on students, specifically online education. And for me personally, I've always been under the impression that an online classroom should mimic the traditional classroom, even to the point where, students are able to watch lectures, the same lectures that were given in person. I thought that that was necessary for online education, but going through this entire master's program online, I've really been able to see the benefits of doing things in an asynchronous way that's not the same as a traditional classroom, because I think that both have their benefits, but one can't completely replicate the other one because they're two totally different experiences, and we have to tailor our classrooms accordingly. A group of researchers published an article in the American Economic Review, and they spoke about this issue. And what they did was they looked at a college or a university that had online classes as well as traditional classes. They had a student body of roughly 100,000 students, and about 2/3 of the students that went to the school were taking their classes online. And so they looked at how online courses benefited and whether or not they did better in the traditional classroom or in their online classes. And the way that they had their online classes set up, it was set up to almost entirely mimic the traditional classroom. So here's the results that they found. Our estimates provide evidence that online courses do less to promote student academic success and progression than do in-person courses. Taking a course online reduces student achievement in that course, as measured by grades, by about 1/3 of a standard deviation. Taking a course online also reduces student grades in future courses by 1/8 of a standard deviation and reduces the probability of remaining enrolled a year later by over 10 percentage points. And that was from Bettinger, Fox, Loeb, and Taylor, 2017, page 2857. So even though there's been this debate in online education as to, should the classes be synchronous or should they be asynchronous? Should it be a completely separate experience than the traditional classroom, or should it be a replica of the traditional classroom? But I think that, although both of these are helpful, I don't think that one or the other is better. I think that what is better for an online classroom, and the benefit of an online classroom, is that it gives you this wiggle room. It gives you the opportunity to be creative and to truly tailor the class specifically to what the students need. And so I think that the best is to really have the best of both worlds and have a classroom that has both qualities, both asynchronous and synchronous. I think that's how students will get the best experience from that. And I felt that in my experience with online education now, I think that that would be the most practical approach. There's an article written by George Selix in 2001 that does a really good job speaking about this. It's called Improved Blended Learning. And in this article, he mentions that these web-based instructor-led seminars, ILS, are used to introduce and explain concepts, demonstrate procedures, and field questions in real time. This lets us significantly reduce delivery costs, travel, and increase the frequency and accessibility of the course. One instructor can now reach the entire nation multiple times each day. We limit the sessions to 2 hours and a maximum student to teacher ratio of 30:1 to increase interactivity. This often results in a multi-day course, but time-spaced learning has merit in its own right. So what Mr. Selix is saying in this article, I think, is spot on in that, yes, there are benefits to asynchronous or synchronous learning, but the combination of the two is really the key. And what he's looking at is, even though students, as part of their synchronous learning, they do have to meet at particular times, but what happens is it increases the interactivity between students, and it makes it much more like a real classroom without the limitations of the real classroom, such as having to travel and be there in person. So students are still able to take the class from the comfort of their own home or at the library or somewhere else, but they're also still interacting in real time. They're able to ask the teacher questions, raise their hand and get a response in real time, as opposed to a classroom that's completely asynchronous, where the only way they can get a response is via email or some other type of web forum. And I think that is helpful, just to be able to send an email or an instant message to a teacher, or even a text message. But I think that there still is no substitution for a student being able to ask a question right there in class and get an immediate response. And I think that helps the other students in the class also, because they're hearing all the questions coming from their peers. And maybe that will either answer the questions that they've been thinking also, or it might bring up new questions, as opposed to sending an email that's a private email just between the student and the teacher. And maybe that one student will be helped by that, but the rest of the class is then not getting that same information. So ultimately, I think that online learning is a work in progress, because the internet itself is still a relatively new technology that people are still getting used to. But I think that as time goes on, the more and more people get used to internet technology, we'll better be able to know how to go about online learning in a way that is going to produce much more fruit than it already has. So I'm looking forward to the future of technology that's going to be used in online courses, and I really hope to be a part of that in some capacity.